While Ding and Nepo were sweating it out in the World Championship match, Magnus Carlsen looked like he was enjoying his newfound freedom. He was playing some poker, hanging out with his beautiful friends, and he was launching a new line of sneakers for Puma. Oh, Magnus, where did it all go wrong? When he returned from his vacation, he looked like he'd let himself go a bit. He looked like Robinson Crusoe before he'd managed to find a barber. The Superbet Rapid and Blitz tournament held in Warsaw would be a stern test for Carlsen. Could he get himself in the zone again? The first 3 days of rapid chess ended in success for Jan-Krzysztof Duda, the hometown boy, 25 years old and a real specialist in rapid chess. Carlsen was struggling. He won a couple but lost a game as well and made lots of draws. He was definitely really struggling to get into gear. But Carlsen stormed back in the Blitz, and with 1 round to go, he was leading the overall tournament standings. As it happened, by the luck of the draw, Carlsen faced Duda in the final round, with Duda just a point behind. So Duda needed to win the game to catch up with Carlsen. Carlsen just needed a draw to win the tournament. Eyes down for an extraordinary game. This really was something else. So Carlsen with white, and he played e4. Now, if you're playing for a draw, then actually e4 is not a bad move, because often there are sharp lines, for example in the Spanish, that can just fizzle out to a draw. So perhaps that was what Carlsen was relying on. But Duda plays the Sicilian, and not one of the main lines. Again, that might make life a bit easy for Carlsen, because he could sort of whip out some theory. But Duda goes for b6. Now this really is a sideline. It doesn't have a very good reputation. Then again, this is a blitz game. Remember, 5 minutes plus 2 seconds increment per move. But, you know, with a fast time control, it can be difficult to refute these sidelines. I mean, the real problem is that Black's development is so poor here, on the king side that is. a6, you see, you know, it's not helping the king side development. The problem is that if you want to develop with e6, you've got to watch out for knight b5. So that's what a6 does, stops a knight b5 happening. But Black is really behind development. Now, you know, what is Black doing with this system? Well, basically, Black wants to set up a kind of hedgehog position. So, for example, if White plays very modestly, like this, then Black is getting the desired setup. You play bishop e7, you castle, and typical kind of hedgehog position with Black that you see in the Scheveningen or in the Najdorf. But Carlsen's too switched on for that, and very quickly he played bishop g5, and this just cuts across Black's setup. Excellent move. You know, obviously prevents e6. Knight f6 doesn't look good for loads of reasons. I mean, White could even simply just exchange it off, or maybe just go e5. So, and, you know, a move like this, well, that pawn is just too weak. It weakens the f5 and h5 squares, and White can break up those pawns with h4. So, bishop g5 is one of those really annoying moves that stumps Black's development. So Duda played queen c7. Now that's a tricky move, because the queen looks down this diagonal, looks down here as well. But Carlsen was ready for it. Knight d5. I mean, this really is going for Black. And, well, Black can win a pawn here, like this. But what an appalling position. You know, this bishop is ready to come here. This bishop looks good here. Castles. Again, development is the problem. While Black's queen is going on a shopping spree, well, the rest of the pieces are suffering. So knight d5, what should black play? Well, Duda played queen e5, hitting the bishop. And the bishop came back. And now e6. Well, there's a very obvious trap here. If knight takes pawn, then queen a5 check wins the knight. But Carlsen had this nice move prepared, knight f3, and this is winning material. Black is in an absolute mess here. Attacking the queen, which took on e4, and Carlsen forked king and rook. The king stepped up. Now, here is where I think Carlsen lost his nerve a little bit. Remember, Carlsen just needs a draw to win the tournament. I think if he'd been in a must-win situation, then he'd have gone for something sharper. So Carlsen took the rook, which actually makes life a lot easier for black. Queen d2 is a much better move. Because if black keeps that rook, then white is castling. I mean, the rook is in a terrible position. You know, suddenly queen d6 check is a possibility. Queen b4 check anyway. Bishop takes b6. I mean, this is completely winning for white. And otherwise, well, let's say knight f6 castles anyway. Now you can take the rook, but this is a very different situation to the game, where the queens are still on the board. White's development is fantastic. Yeah, the king is still in trouble. This is fantastic for white. But Carlsen, after a little bit of thought, kind of played it safe. He obviously thought, look, I'll grab material. I'm the exchange up. I just want to exchange pieces. You know, I'm better in an endgame. Why not? Why not go for this? Now it's not so clear, incredibly. So first of all, b5 saves that pawn, a very important pawn. Nice pawns. a4 breaks up the pawns, but incredibly, even though black's development looks absolutely dreadful, this position is not so clear. Now, of course, if you're playing the best moves with white, then white still has a very clear advantage. But in a blitz game, it's not that simple. And why is it not so simple? Because actually, black has a beautiful clump of pawns. Those centre pawns protect the king. And if you can get those rolling down the board, then life is not so simple. Now, Carlsen continued to play on the queen side. I mean, this is good. You know, it targets this pawn and this one as well. But black's pieces come out very quickly. Knight looking good on d5. And you can see how white is lacking centre pawns. And so black is able to station this knight in the middle and hassle that bishop. Bishop a7 hits the knight. And then, because Carlsen wants to target the a6 pawn. And now the bishop came back here. g5 played. And in fact, g6 is a little bit better. This is quite obscure, but I'll show you why in a second. So g5, I mean, that's to let the bishop out. Carlsen takes on a6. I mean, he must have thought he's just in total control here. He's the exchange up. He's grabbed an important pawn. But watch what happens. Bishop g7. Rook a2, guarding that pawn. You can see that just with a couple of moves, black is now developed, basically. And the king is in a wonderful position in the middle of the board. So a few moves back, it was looking like an absolute disaster in the middle. Now it's very well placed behind those pawns. Rook b8. Threatening the bishop. Now the problem is that bishop lacks squares, so Carlsen decided just to remove this bishop here. But bishop e3 still gives white the advantage, and let me show you how. I mean, this is all about saving this pawn here. So this didn't happen, but let me just show you why this is better for white. So essentially, it's just about keeping that strong passed a pawn. And white is better here because after bishop takes g2, rook takes g5. That's an important pawn to win. And okay, if we just go on a few moves, a6. That is a really powerful pawn. And although black's minor pieces are beautifully placed, white must be better there. So you can see why, just coming back to this position, it would have been better to play g6. Because back here, if that pawn had been on g6, then white wouldn't have been able to even up the score. I mean, even there, I suspect white is better, but still. Okay, coming back here. Okay, that was a long and obscure variation. As I said, it's a blitz game. You haven't got time to calculate those long lines. So Carlsen played a natural move. He just put the bishop back on e2. Because he was thinking that here, well, rook takes pawn impossible because of rook takes bishop. So he must have thought, surely, I'm still better here. But after this move, it's not so clear. Excellent move. That knight hits lots of things here and opens up this bishop. Carlsen exchanged. Now this pawn is about to be taken. So Carlsen thought, right, got to get rid of those two bishops. Let's exchange one of them off. Sound. However, that does wreck his kingside pawns. And instead of taking here straight away, Duda decided just to give that pawn to wreck white's pawns on the queen side. It's a good idea. So pawns are now even. 5 pawns against 5 pawns. But the quality of black's pawns, they are absolutely beautiful. They give the king wonderful protection. The rook and bishop combine beautifully. It's so often the case in endgames that they're a great partnership. And yes, white's rooks are split. They're not coordinated. And more than that, the rooks don't really have open files to operate on. They're not very effective in this position when black's position is so secure. They haven't really got any targets. So in fact, Carlsen has to be careful here. I mean, objectively, it's a level position. So let's see what he did. h4. So good start from Carlsen. He wants to exchange off pawns. Remember, he just needs a draw. Moved his king up. Yeah, I mean, this pawn has to drop, basically. And then he switched his rook over. So he's starting to coordinate. But his pawns are still a wreck. Duda wants to avoid a rook exchange. b3. So Carlsen is finding his feet. f5. Duda starts to advance those central pawns. And you can see that, yeah, these rooks are kind of struggling to actually achieve anything in this position. They lack purpose. As I said, nothing to attack here, really. So Duda's plan is just to inch forward, or even rush forward. And in combination with the rook and bishop, that could be quite serious. So Carlsen decides, fine, I'm happy to give up that pawn if it means I can exchange rooks. So for example, if bishop takes pawn, rook b3, it's not winning a piece because the rook comes across to check. And then the rook interposes. Duda wants to avoid an exchange, so would come back. That would be a draw straight away. Okay, coming back here. So b4 just played. Duda wants to avoid an exchange. Rook b3, but Carlsen has found a little bit of space. And now that rook goes on a little journey. Bishop c5. So Duda still wants to take that one. Of course, rook b8 was a threat here. That's quite nasty. Pinning. So bishop c5, targeting the pawn, and Carlsen decides to force that exchange of rooks. After this, we've got this endgame. Now, bishop and 4 against rook and 2. Black, if anyone is better here, it's black. You know, black is completely solid, and it's a question of whether black can advance those pawns. I mean, by this stage, they were running pretty short of time, particularly Carlsen, actually. So Carlsen just has to slow up the advance of these pawns. So that king heading for the beautiful f4 square. I was actually surprised. Carlsen played rook g7 here. I thought that rook h6 would be more tenacious. I think it could be very difficult to advance those pawns after rook h6. But, well, that's just another story. Who knows? Rook g7. And the king comes in. And the pawns slowly advance. Well, with a bit of toing and froing. There we go. Duda makes another step forward. He's getting closer to getting 2 central passed pawns. And he's got there. So this is... We've still got a very long way to go in this game, I'm telling you. But hang on in there, because some interesting stuff happens. Carlsen just has to stop these pawns advancing. And of course, if he can sack the rook for 2 pawns, that'd be good. Now I'm going to leap ahead 20 moves to get to this position. Carlsen has stationed the rook here. So that means if the pawn is advanced, then the rook will sacrifice itself. And that's just a draw. Now I think the simplest way to go here would be just to play rook h3. And if king c4, I mean, that's essential if you're going to play d3, so the king needs to cover. And then rook h4. Now, you can see everything is lined up beautifully on the 4th rank. And if the pawn checks, then it makes no difference at all. You can see there's a problem here. That pawn on e4 is going to drop. So it seems to me that rook h3 is the best move. Just holding the position and threatening rook h4. And I don't see how black can make progress there. But Carlsen, I mean, he was down to his final seconds. And so, well, he made another move which also looks fine. And it is fine. But here is where he made a mistake. He should switch across again. Easy for me to say. Instead, he played rook d5. This is a mistake. King c4. Now, here he played rook f5. He's actually lost in this position. Let's just check out rook h5. He played rook f5. I'll deal with that in a second. Let's look at rook h5. This is interesting. This defense no longer works. Watch this. d3. e3. So this is what black wants. Clearly e2 and then a bishop check. So why is rook h4 not drawing? Well, watch this. Now the king comes to d4. Rook takes bishop. King e3. Attacks the rook and threatens d2 mate. There is no defense. It's incredible. That's a beautiful winning idea. Rook f5 played instead. This is winning for black. d3 check. So Duda has achieved d3. But here he gets it wrong. He should play bishop d6. He played bishop g3. He should play bishop d6. Okay, let me try and explain why. So we know that this is the threat. So white just has to somehow hassle black's pieces. So rook f6, rook f5, and now king d4. You can see black is getting there. Everything is protected, ready for this one. Okay, rook g5, e3. There's still a bit to go. This is very interesting. Check, king back. So this is this is quite serious. Okay, now king e4. King is getting into the right position and covered by the bishop. Rook e8, king f4. Check. We're getting there. Bishop f4, yeah. Now, the king is ready to come to f3 and then e2 check. So king e1, check. King f3, we're getting there. Here, bishop f4, king c1 and e2. So with some very patient, diligent play, black can achieve a win. Remember, this is a blitz game and they were down to their final seconds, and to play with such care is very, very difficult. However, I think once you get to the position with the pawn on e3, then you're going to fiddle your way to a win. But first of all, you have to get the right bishop move, and bishop d6 is correct. You're never going to understand that when you're playing instantly. Duda played bishop g3, which looks so plausible. It looks like this one is about to march. And after rook g5, he played bishop f2. Again, it looks so plausible. It looks like this is the way to go. But rook g4, and white is okay here, incredibly. King here. In fact, rook g8 is a mistake again. Here, bishop d4 is winning. Let me just show you. I mean, this is a very attractive variation. So, bishop d4 is apparently winning. Duda played king d4, but I just want to show you what happens after e3, because it looks like this should be winning. But watch this. This is just amazing. So white has to prevent e2. So rook e8, king here. Okay, if this bishop can redeploy, and then the king will step forward, and e2 comes, that's the end of the world basically. So bishop here and then e2 should be winning. So therefore white checks. Okay, checks again. e2 is a threat. Rook f8, king g2. Okay, the rook comes back to defend against e2. King f1. Now, it looks like black has achieved exactly what he wants to, and he's ready to push forward. But this is still a draw. Hopefully you can spot it. Rook takes pawn. There we go. One of my favourite defences in chess, stalemate. I love that rule. My favourite rule in chess. Almost. So it's remarkable, isn't it, how in this position there are still really complex defences. Okay, let's roll on. So as I said, bishop d4 apparently is winning here, but king d4 happened. Now, I'm going to leap forward by about 30 odd moves and come to this position, because you can see not a lot has happened. Yeah. In fact, for most of those 30 odd moves, Carlsen was playing incredibly accurately. Or not incredibly, he was just playing accurately. He was playing really well. Occasionally, as in here, he would make a slip. So rook c8, according to the table base, is a mistake. He should just play rook a4 check. And Duda, apparently, according to the table bases, bishop b6 still wins. But anyway, he played a plausible move, bishop f4. And after this, well, they were in the drawing zone again. So we're on move 121 at this point. And finally, well, I mean, I don't know whether the players, I realised this, of course they didn't. They weren't playing on a digital board. They were playing on a proper, real board. This is 123, move 123. And in fact, the last pawn move was at move 73. So in fact, I don't know whether the arbiters were keeping note, whether they would step in, but this should be a draw by the 50 move rule. But okay, I don't think the arbiters were keeping note of how many moves have been made. Actually, they should have. They should have that on a screen in front of them. But anyway, Rook E8 played, and this is drawing straight away because now that pawn is falling. King C3 and Rook takes E4. And at this point, the players agree to draw, of course. Incredible. As I said, for most of those, well, this endgame was kind of 70 odd moves. Carlsen played absolutely brilliantly. There were only a couple of occasions where he slipped into a lost position and it was simply too complex for Duda to appreciate that. And yeah, a draw at the end. Well, that was kind of essential Magnus. He displayed the old fighting spirit. You know, when his back is at the wall, he just doesn't give up. What an incredible fighter. So he picked up $40,000 for his trouble. It'll be interesting to see how he gets on in Norway Chess, which is the classical chess event, which begins in Stavanger on the 29th of May. Hope you enjoyed that. It's nice to be back. See you later.